Hi everybody, welcome back to Jason Morgan Wildlife Art, and today I'm going to talk to you about glazing. And the medium I'll be using is this walnut alkyd medium, and the paints are alkyd oils by Winsor & Newton. Alkyds dry faster than regular oils, but other than that they behave the same. Okay, so what is a glaze? Well, let me start by showing you what a glaze is not. Here I'm putting out some of the medium to thin my paints, and I'm going to mix some white paint, and white is obviously a very opaque paint. Notice how when I apply it to the black markings, it completely covers the underpainting. So that's what a glaze is not. So a glaze is actually a paint that is transparent enough that we can still see the marks underneath. Okay, so let's see how some other colours react. A little bit more medium, and let's try raw sienna. You can see how it's toning the white canvas, but you can still perfectly see the black markings. So that's obviously a great candidate for glazing. And I use raw sienna quite a lot with animal colours, as you can imagine. Okay, let's try ultramarine blue. Even as a paint straight out with no glazing medium, you can see that it's a very transparent paint. And with a little bit of medium as well, it's even more transparent. I'll just clean out my brush before I try with burnt sienna. A little bit more medium, burnt sienna, just to thin it down. And you can see that that's very transparent as well, even though it's an earth colour. But when you use the paint straight and thick, you can see that it is actually covering the black. So burnt sienna is a little bit different. If you thin it enough, it becomes a great glaze. Okay, I'll wash my brush off again and we'll try the cadmium yellow. Let's try the paint first straight, just straight out the tube, and you can see that is really quite opaque, so it's probably got quite a lot of white fillers in the colour. Let's try thinning it down with some medium. And it's gone from an orange more to a yellow now. There, very transparent. And you can imagine how I use this quite a lot for tigers and also lion colours. So there's some examples of transparent and semi-transparent paints. Raw sienna, if you add a little bit of white or any of these other colours with white, obviously become less transparent. So if you want a glaze, if you are glazing colours, the tip here is obviously not to put any white into the mix whatsoever. Okay, let's take a look at a simple glazing example with some fur texture. I painted the fur for this demo just with some burnt sienna and a little bit of burnt umber, just to create a dark square on the canvas, and then I've created some rough fur texture with some just plain white acrylic paint, just to allow it to dry quickly. Here I'm mixing burnt sienna with some medium, and it's quite a lot of medium I'm using, just to make sure it's very transparent, just to show you how I can simply tone a canvas, and notice how much you can really see the fur texture still through it. So this is obviously showing an extreme example where I'm actually taking almost pure white paint and making a fur colour out of it. Normally I would actually paint the fur quite close and then use the glazes just to adjust. Here I'm just scrubbing it on the already dried underpainting. A little bit more medium, and you can actually just put the medium straight on the canvas, then dip into the raw paint straight out the tube and apply it that way instead. So the fur I'm working on, it could be something like a grizzly bear or a rough wolf fur or anything like that. It's just a generic fur. Okay, so that's our canvas covered, just with an undertone and underglaze. Now I'm going to darken it with some burnt umber, more burnt sienna, just to show you how I can make areas appear to be in shadow or appear to be behind other areas of fur. Now I'm going to start brushing more in the fur direction, in the fur growth. I'm going to start making some areas recede and make some areas come forward. I'm just going to continue to apply the glaze just to certain areas to make a nice dark undertone, so that I can put some opaque layers, some individual haze on top at a later stage. So I'm really using the glaze as a tonal adjustment layer, really. Okay, let's really darken it in stages now, just to push some areas back, just to create a shadow appearance. And the burnt umber I'm using with the burnt sienna is one of those paints that can be very opaque if you're using it straight out the tube, or it only takes a little bit of medium to make it quite transparent as well. Right, let's darken this area, just so that I can show you how I bring lighter areas on top of dark and dark on top of light. And as these areas are getting darker, it's really crucial now to be brushing in the fur direction, otherwise it would look completely unnatural. You can see there when I'm using it almost straight out the tube, it is very opaque. But it's not very often when I'm glazing that I'm actually just going to colour an area. This is more of a natural example I'm showing you now of the way I would work on something like a grizzly bear fur. And sometimes these colours, these reds and orangey colours and yellows of tigers, they're almost impossible to paint in a direct wet on wet fashion, because the colours, the nature of those particular colours is that they are actually quite transparent. So sometimes I paint the painting a little bit lighter than I would normally expect or normally want, and then I use this glazing technique over the top so that I can still give quite a bit of vibrancy to the colours. Creating some real darks in some areas now. This is almost really like two demos in one. It's not only glazing, it is actually a fur technique demonstration. It's difficult to do one without the other. Okay, I'm just studying the actual fur texture now, and I think I'll bring out a few highlights and use some opaque paint now, just so they will easily overlap over the underpainting. And I'm going to put in some haze, some individual fur texture haze, and just overlap certain areas, just so that I can give an appearance of a sheen to the fur. So it's a great example of showing a glaze underneath and going to opaque paints on top. And you see how quickly I can actually produce a fairly realistic fur texture, fur appearance. Obviously for a major painting I'd be going a little bit slower and more careful than this. Okay, so you can really see how the addition of just a little bit of white have really made that paint much more opaque now. And it's important when you're painting realistic fur to actually look at the reference and study the fur texture, not just the colours, and see if you can actually see a softer, fluffier fur underneath, and then these more rigid guard hairs on top. And it's changing those textures that really give the appearance of a realistic fur. When you're overlapping fur, it's always a good idea to not follow exactly the lines, the texture lines that you've got underneath, but to go in a slightly different direction so they overlap. And very often if I'm doing a major painting and I can't quite get the appearance I want in one or two layers, I'll allow this layer to dry overnight, and then I may very well put another glaze over the top, a light glaze, a real transparent one, and then work into that area once again with opaque paint. And that's really the layering method, where you can get numerous layers just to really build up the depth of the texture. Always remember that an animal is very rarely got just one or two layers. It's usually numerous layers, and to paint that realistically you're going to have to paint numerous layers on top. There you go. I think that looks fairly realistic for a very quick painting, showing glazing with a little bit of opaque overpainting. Hope you enjoyed it.